current Scoutmaster, Troop 152, Mark Querry, and Kim Morrison, the Donut Man, who's the chairman of scouting for Big One District. All three of whom are expert campers and know more about tents than I can imagine. So without further ado, take it away. Sure. I'll go back here and hide.
Well, first thing I want to do, I want to apologize because it's the third time you got to listen to me. I think Dr. Ayler took advantage. I think about the oldest one of the thing. So tonight we have outdoor dwelling. Now, I don't think any of you will ever probably have to go into what I have here, unless you want to be a recluse. But then, so we have what we've been teaching our scouts over the years. And usually, they go prepared if you're going to go camping. But if you go on a hike, and if you get lost, and the sun's going down, it's a different situation. So I can tell the scouts, when they get to a point where they don't know where they're at, well, what they do, they look around and get the biggest stick they can find. And then they beat it on the ground for about 3 minutes. Now that's called spontaneous panic, in-place panic. And once you get that out of your system, then you look around and see what you're going to do. One thing we have when they go on the hikes, this is also supposed to be for insect control. Now your insect repellent with the highest percentage of DEET, whatever that stands for, I can't remember, but it's spelled D-E-E-T. It's a good mosquito repellent, and I tell the boys when they go on the trails, you either tuck your pants leg inside your stocking and you spray with this. It used to be all you had to worry about was the tick with Rocky Mountain fever. And they never bothered because they're too far from the Rocky Mountains anyway. But now they have deer ticks, and you can get sleeping sickness. So we recommend that if you're going out on the trail, going on a hike through grass or through a woodland, spray your stockings, and then you put your pants leg in your stockings, or you spray your stockings real good. Also your hands, but might come in contact with it. It works pretty good up north, except they say these here black flies and deer flies, they land jaw first. They don't take time to land. So you get one of these things, and all it is just a mosquito net. It slows them down a little bit. I think they can still bite through it. And then, of course, you have a pair of brown gloves you can put on, and I don't know what they look like, but it sort of serves a purpose for it. So anyway, when the scout finds out that he's lost, you try to find the easiest place to go. And hopefully you can find a cave that isn't occupied. Now if you find a nice driving like that, you're in business. But those caves don't always come out that nice. Sometimes it's just a cubby hole back underneath the root of a tree that's blown over. Now your old ancient cavemen, they enjoyed it, but they found out that they couldn't get very much mobility on it. Now there's one of the things that we teach the scouts. If nothing else, you rake a pile of leaves together and you crawl inside. The thing is with this, you got to get out of the wind. The wind is the most deadly thing that you can have because it just reduces your body heat down to where hypothermia sets in. Of course, you have to be in a hardwood woods to do that. Now, if you haven't got a hardwood, if you're in a pine forest, you can go on the downhill side of a small pine tree, notch it. If you have your scout pocket knife, you're supposed to be prepared. Bend it over until it snaps. And then you take the limbs off the top of it, lay on the side of it, you make a windbreak. You always point the peak of it towards the wind. That won't keep all the rain off, but it'll break a lot of wind, and it gives you some sense of security anyway. Then, if you're not in a place where you get enough limbs, and of course, probably if you broke that tree off, you'd have a park warden right there on your neck anyway. So you're not lost anymore. But anyway, you can build yourself a lean-to. You can lean it up against a bank. You can put it across a depression in the terrain. But just make sure that you're not in a gully where if it rains during the night, you get flooded out. Now, if you're in the woods where you have a lot of blowdowns, you can build yourself a lean-to right against the trunk of the tree. You do the same thing. You take your poles, your smaller poles, and cover it with brush, leaves, anything. Just you want to break that wind, and besides that, like I said, it gives you a feeling of security anyway. I'm going to make this short because, like I said, I think you're tired of hearing me talk. Anyway, then they discovered you didn't have to have a blowdown. You found a fork tree, or you get some forks in the ground. You can make your own lean-to and put it just about any place you wanted to put it. This right here I have covered with bark. You can find enough bark that long, but it can be covered with anything. It can be covered with brush or leaves. But you got to get yourself always facing away from the wind. You build yourself a place where you affect the fire. Hopefully you'll be found within. This is just a temporary shelter. Now, a month or so ago, there was on the boob tube about these 4 college students being caught out in the Alps when they're skiing. And 2 of them died from hypothermia. I don't know whether they could or not, but they could have tried to make a snow cave. That's what that's supposed to be, whether it looks like it or not. But you tunnel down into your snow banks, you tunnel into your snow drifts, or you can pack the snow and then tunnel back into it. The activity will warm you up a little bit. If you get it, but you don't want it too big anyway, just enough to crawl back in. Your own body heat should keep you alive until at least somebody finds you. Of course, the Eskimo is a little bit smarter. He decided that snow didn't work so good, he'd just make himself a house out of it. So he packed the snow up there, and I've seen several movies of how nice and warm and comfortable it is in those things, but I was in the warm living room, and I wasn't in that place, so. But I guess they live in them. Now, the Eastern Indians in the United States, they built what they call a wickiup. And all that is just, they take saplings and bend them over, lash them at the top, and where they can take where they have the vacant spots and just embed them in the ground and do the same thing. They discovered they get more living room inside of it. It breaks the wind, and the only problem was they found out they couldn't build a fire inside of them. And as the leaves dried out and the limbs dried out, why, it became quite drafty. So then some smart Indian woman, she decided to take the wickiup and cover it with skins. Well, that made the old Indian boy pretty happy, because he didn't have to fool around anymore, because the women knew more than he did. So all he had to do is go ahead and hunt and fish. But then they discovered they cut a hole in the top, they could build a fire inside of it. And so it more or less became a permanent structure. They could live in cooler weather, in fact even into the snowy weather. Then we have the Western Indians. And they were just smart. They came up with the teepee. That's nothing but a few live whole pine that's been trimmed. They lash it at the top, and then they hoist the skin covering for it. This, of course, I think is buffalo skin. And they discovered they could build a fire in the center of that, and they had the smoke directors there where everything worked out just fine. Not only that, again, the women could take it down and put it up, and so they didn't have to fool with it. And it was mobile, so maybe that was the first mobile home that they had. Now that is the shelter half. About 50-odd years ago, Uncle Sam, or the military, found out that they couldn't keep the troops in the barracks all the time, so they decided to make a tent, a pup tent, which was great. That pup tent there weighs about 5 pounds, but they found out that, well, I think they found out, that to give the guy the tent himself, they might wake up one morning, he'd be gone over the hill. So they gave him half a tent. They put buttons on them. You button two of them together. Then they give you one tent pole, a jointed tent pole, not two of them, just one per man. Then they give you 4 tent pegs. Now that was just enough to do your half of the tent. That means you had to find somebody to bunk with, whether you wanted to or not. Otherwise, you rolled yourself up in the canvas. About, I would say, maybe 10, 12 million American GIs slept in these darn things. Now they have buttons on the end too. In real cold weather, you put 2 of these together with the door on the side. Otherwise, you had it wide open to the mosquitoes and everything. It kept you warm anyway. Now, last but not least, everybody here probably will never get out in some of these shelters that I've shown you. Maybe if you were scouts, you were in the type of tents that I'm showing you here. But everybody goes in these things. Now that is the modern outdoor dwelling. Now when I go on a trip, especially this time of year, I have a sleeping bag, because you never know when you're going to be forced off the road by some dumb driver. Of course, it's never your fault. Then also in my survival kit, I have a pair of mittens, nice stocking cap, and it gets cold inside the car after a while, especially when the engine isn't running. And I have a candle. It'll keep the car pretty warm if you leave the windows down on the downwind side of the car, 1/2 inch to 1 inch. You won't suffocate in there. But it works pretty good. That's necessity. It's awful cold. Have water, a cup. And then also I have my little camp stove, that little cricket stove that I showed you a couple of weeks ago. With that you can heat up the car pretty good. It doesn't take, this is just a propane tank of, like you use on a little torch. It's enough to keep you alive until help comes, hopefully. Of course, you always got to have your matches, because these won't start by themselves. And then the good old heat pack. I showed that 2 weeks ago. They come in real handy. Then you have your instant food. Like Kim told you last week, you gotta have candy bars to get your high heat up. And you'll have instant coffee, tea, sugar. You get quite comfortable, really, if you don't panic in it. But you gotta keep the snow away from your tailpipe. Gotta keep your windows open. And And I also have a CB, which comes in pretty heavy, because you can see if there's any records out there that pull you off you slide off the road. But outside of that, that's as far as I shall go. Mark, if you can take over, please.
In case you didn't notice on your agenda sheets on the back, there's dates and the address of where the scouts meet for their campouts. We're going to have a couple campouts in February and March that if anybody's interested. February, we're going to kind of prepare for our March campout by means of setting up some camp gadgets and getting some of our wood cut for some lashings we're going to be doing and whatnot. In March, we're going to have kind of a mini camporee where we'll have quite a few demonstrations, and there'll be a couple other troops with us that'll be putting on some contests and trying to compete with each other as far as outside dwelling, some utensilist cooking and whatnot. So if anybody's interested and would like to come out and just look around, feel free at any time. And if you want to camp, just let me know and we'll try to set you up.
Where do you camp?
Camp Candy.
Where's that?
What's on the back of your agenda?
Oh!
And it's on West Washington Street. You really can't miss it. You go down West Washington Street. Well, try to do it during the day. If you try to do it at night, you can't miss it. As you're going down West Washington on the south side of the road, there's a row of homes, and at the end of the row of homes is the entrance to Camp Candy. You really can't miss it. Really, you can't. If I could get you to bring the tripod over, I appreciate it. Now, Walt and I were going over some of this stuff, and he mentioned that, yeah, we're going to do outdoor dwellings. So he decided to do the outdoor dwelling part, and I'm going to do the dwelling outdoors part. Because what my part is, I'm going to show you all the modern types of tonnage and equipment that you might possibly run across and can use depending on what type of camping you want to do. I wanted to start off first and explain this tent here is it's a 10 by 10 umbrella tent or dome tent. It's one that I use when the wife and I want to go camping. That means 100 square feet, and if you figure anywhere from 20 to 30 square feet per person, that includes your gear, 30 square feet you need for you and your gear. So you could have 3 people with all their gear in here and have gobs of room. Now we inflate a king size air mattress and throw our gear in there, but we've got a full. The wife likes to take a few more comforts at home than I probably would. And then I also lashed up a little deal that we have used at times. All this is a couple sticks that are lashed at the top. It falls down really easy. But you just do a square lashing on it. Bring the pole up, set it on there, and throw your ground cloth over it. And you can crawl in, it'll keep the dew off of you. Sometimes it'll even keep you dry if you're having to run into quite a bit of rain. But you got to work your ground cloth around to where it fits underneath you. That's a real quick up shelter if you don't want to spend too much time. I thought I'd start out with, you've got your equipment now, how are you going to take care of it? Your proper care, what you want to do. When you first get your tonnage, you want to go ahead and set it up right away. First thing I do is I grab everything out of the box, make sure I got all the poles, tents, stakes, works, and I set it up in my backyard. Then I go around and I read all the they have little instruction tags stuck everywhere. And you go through and you read all those. And then you want to go ahead and let it stand for a little bit, just to see what it's going to do. Sometimes I'll let it stand for a week, just see how it holds up. You want to check and make sure that you get the little bottle that comes with a seam sealer, because that will end up being real important to you, especially after that first rain. After the first rain, I like to go ahead, or any time it's gotten wet, the first time, I'll go back and reseal my seams with it. After a few outings, you might want to find that you need to really put a heavy coat on it. Now, I like to go ahead and buy silicone water repellent. That to me works best. There are some repellents out now, water repellents, that are a little more environment friendly, but as usual, they don't work quite as well. So it depends on your preference on how you want to do this. This will even take care of waterproof your boots, any canvas and nylon stuff. You're out camping and you do get your tent wet. So what are you going to do with it? Well, you don't want to pack it all up, take it home, throw it in the garage or in the basement and leave it. Because the next time you bring it out, you may find out you don't have a tent left. Mildew might get into it and rot it, might really make a mess out of it. So what you want to do is go home and hang it up somewhere. A garage is a nice place to do that. One of the worst experiences I had was we were at Camp Camping and had a brand new Walt tent. It was about 40 degrees out, real nice. That evening it cooled down, a storm come through and dumped about 4 inches of wet snow. Right down on our tent. Of course the tent collapsed in and we had to go out and restake it out. If you get about 4 inches of wet snow on a nice wall tent, you got a lot of weight. I'm laying there with snow in a tent right on my face. So we had to go ahead and shake the tent out after we were trying to get all that snow off of it, and I took it home and hung it up and dried it out. And it's extremely important that you try to remember to do these things. On repair, you're out camping, a lot of times you have to make a quick repair. You've gone hiking, a windstorm came up and a big branch came down and went right down through the middle of your tent. And you keep thinking, oh my gosh, good thing it wasn't last night we were sleeping in it. But now, since that storm blew in, it started to rain, then what are you going to do? Well, this stuff is handy. This stuff, MacGyver will tell you it'll fix anything, right? So always try to keep a roll of duct tape stuck somewhere, or some kind of electrical tape sometimes will work. But the duct tape I found is the best for all of it. The only thing is you don't want to leave it on there a long time, or the sticky backing will try to permanently affix itself to your tent when you try to take it off to repair the hole, and then it gets kind of messy. Also, if you remember the first class we had, I showed you a little sewing kit you're supposed to keep with you. That comes in real handy for tent repair. I've also found that repairing particularly canvas, and you can do some nylon, is a hot glue gun, and excuse me, and some patch material that matches what you're repairing. If it's canvas, and if you're in scouts, you always have a ripped tent or two that's just totally unrepairable. Of course, they're usually 25, 30 years old sometimes. You just keep that stuff, cut up little patches, and hot glue gun it right on. That fixes like nice burn holes where you can't bring the tent back together and sew it because it makes too big a pucker mark and affects your tent. You just put this hot glue gun patch right over the top of it. You can do the same thing with nylon, but you really have to watch the temperature on it, or you can just start to melt the rest of your nylon out. I also found sometimes, particularly with fiberglass poles. Fiberglass poles tend to splinter real bad, especially in cold weather. And like on this tent here, I have an extra set of poles with it. You can order them with your tent, or if you find out that you have busted one and you need them, most tent supply places that you buy them from, they talk customer service and they're more than happy to sell you a whole kit of poles again. But I really like to have extra poles. Now on your tent usage, The life expectancy I read in my one of my magazines I have said it should last 1 full year. That's if you set it up and camped and slept in it for 1 full year, 365 days a year. So if you buy a tent and you use it 1 weekend a year, it's going to last about 180 years, which means it'll probably rot on you before you actually get done using it. So a good tent will last you a long time if you take proper care of it. There's tents I have in Scouts that Walt had when he first came into Scouts. So they're close to 30 years old. And the boys are showed proper care and how to take care of them, and most of them will last. As I mentioned before, the number of square footage that you want for your tent is recommended 20 to 30. Now I like 30, because if you figure 20 square feet, that's approximately an area 3 feet by 7 feet. Well, if you're 6 foot tall and I need at least 3 feet wide, I've got a foot to put my gear. So I really don't think a 1 foot by 3 foot piece is going to do me real well. So I always use the 30 square foot rule when I'm buying a tent. I was just looking through some stuff in Backpacker magazine the other day where they had a tent, said 76 square feet for 4 to 6 people. Well, maybe 2 adults and 4 kids. You'd never get comfortable in a tent that small. Now, what are you going to use your tent for, really? What is your tent's purpose? Your tent's purpose is to keep you warm and dry and to sleep in. And that's primarily it. You don't want to cook in your tent. You can't really party in them real heavy, because a lot of them just don't have the room to do that. About the only thing you're going to do is just stay warm and dry and sleep in it. It's your bedroom, more or less, is the way I like to think of it. The rest of the time, you're going to be out messing around. And one big precaution is, as I mentioned before, you don't want to cook it. You don't want to store anything whatsoever in your tent. There's a story that 2 scouts were sleeping in their tent. Well, they weren't sleeping, they were supposed to be sleeping, and they were talking away, laying, and they had brought their little snacks in and set it down. And nonchalantly, a raccoon just walked in, grabbed their food, and just walked out with them while they were laying there talking. So there's a lot of critters that would like to have the food that's in your tent. That's why when you go on high adventures and whatnot, they have bear bags, and you put your bear bags up and stuff. The year that I came in, the year before that, the troop had gone to Philmont Scout Ranch, and they didn't know it until they had gotten back, but the group in front of them, one boy had been mauled by a bear and about had his scalp ripped off. Well, the reason was they kept pushing that never ever put food in your tent. Well, he thought, well, a pack of gum wouldn't matter, so he stuck a pack of gum in his pocket and went to bed with it. And that bear smelled that and wanted that piece of gum. So that's just, there's more and more examples that you can hear everywhere of why you don't want to put any food in your tent. So how are you going to store your food? Best way is to keep it in your coolers. If you have an area where you're going to run into bears and you got a vehicle, throw it in your vehicle. If you can't put it up in a bear bag. But always try to keep your food separate from your tent, and actually quite a ways from there. I was in Lieber State Park. My brother-in-law and his wife, we're sitting at the picnic tables, and we have our munchies up there, and all of a sudden the wife jumps up and goes, "Oh my gosh." And we thought maybe something happened to the fire, a log rolled out or whatever, but she felt something on the back of her leg. And we just sat there quietly, and you could hear the raccoons just working their way all around. And they were right underneath the picnic table where we were sitting. So we finally got them chased out. And what was interesting, after we chased them out and went down to a trailer, it set up, had a food box right outside their trailer. And they had a small poodle tied up, so it just couldn't quite get to the food box. And they had gone to town or something. And anyway, they weren't there. Well, the raccoons had decided to go over. It was a mom and dad, about 4 babies. and they found out they could lift the lid on the food box and crawl in and toss food out. Well, here's this poor little dog that's about this far from the food box and can't get at him, just barking like crazy while the coons are throwing all the food out of the food box. So we just sat there and laughed and watched. What's neat? Okay. Brought along some charts that I hope everybody can see here. This one might be a little small. But can everybody see this primarily? I want to show a basic campsite layout.
Excuse me, Mark, would it be easier if you were on the other side so the video cam could pick it up? Thanks.
Okay. I want to show a basic campsite layout. Up here would be your tents, and of course, prevailing winds. Now your tents are to the back of that. Normally what I like to do when I set up a tent and there's no wind and I'm not really sure what the weather's going to be like, I like to face my tent east most of the time. Just for the fact that I like to get up in the morning and have the sun shining in my face. Facing east or facing south are primarily the directions you want to put your tent. Most of your strong storms and whatnot will come out of the west or out of the north. You want your fire pit off to one side. We were camping one time and we thought, well, it's always nice to put your campfire right in front of your tent. And we had it all set for wind direction properly when we set it up, but the wind changed direction. And just happened to blow over into one corner of the tent where my assistant was staying. I wasn't affected by it, but he ended up with a whole week of misery after that, the bad head cold and the whole works. 10 feet should be as close as you really want your fire to your tents, just in case the storm does blow up. You want to keep your bear bag, of course, way far away. Of course, then it says no tents or firewood downwind from fire. That way your fire won't blow over into your firewood and catch you on fire also. So you set your firewood just down off of the sides of your tent. And then your kitchen area is over on the opposite side. I like to keep it off-centered for my fire so it's not blowing over into where I want to fix my food. Now let's start with tents. I'm going to start out with the simplest ones. Bivvies are for your minimalist. You're a person that doesn't want to spend a lot of time messing around with the tent, he just wants something to crawl into. Because when I was doing this, reminded me of a story when I was camping back in my minimalist days, that I would just take a sleeping bag and a ground cloth and just throw the ground cloth over the top of me. And that way, if it got dewy or it just started to rain, then my sleeping bag and I were fairly protected. Well, it was kind of a nice evening, and I thought, well, I'll just shuck my shirt and my pants and crawl in my sleeping bag and leave it unzipped because it was still warm enough, and I'll just watch the stars. So I was laying there with my hands behind my head looking up at the stars and kind of getting drowsy. I felt something on the inside of my leg. And I went, well, you know how your covers kind of float down and, you know, cover up your legs and you can feel it. I didn't feel it again. Well, it must have just been the cover settling down. I laid there again, and again I felt something rub on the inside of my leg. I went, oh man, I've got something in here with me. So I had my backpack next to me, and the flashlight always left laying out. So I just grabbed my sleeping bag and my flashlight, and at the same time flicked on the flashlight, ripped back the covers and shined it down. And here were two little beady eyes right between my legs, stared up, and he just turned around and shot. And that poor little mouse was way more scared than I was. But he was just, I suppose, looking for someplace warm. and he picked the wrong guy that night. But that's why it's nice though to have when you're doing some minimalist camping. Bikers like to use this kind of stuff. They're 1- and 2-person bivvies. Some of them are freestanding. Some of them you have to stake down. As you can see on one of these, they also have a vestibule that comes out where you can store some of your gear underneath it. The next group of tents are your backpacker tents. You see a lot of these, if you go to the Boundary Waters, it's about all the outfitters use are these type of tents. It's similar to the tent we had set up the first meeting. These come in every size imaginable. Some of them are up to 6 persons with a 6-foot tall headroom, all the way down to a little 2-person. They come with a vestibule, which is nice. It's an extra area to store your gear if you need it, and it attaches right to the front of your tent. You got a little side area that you can crawl into. What's nice about the bivvies in these tents, or all the tents I'll be showing you, most of them, they're totally enclosed. They have, similar to this tent here, they usually have a screen back window, and they'll have a screen door with a full flap door to help protect against the rain blowing in. When we were up to Boundary Waters at 9:30, if you weren't in your tent, mosquitoes would just swarm you. It was tremendous. As soon as the sun went down, usually we headed to the tent at 9:15. Excuse me, sprayed insect repellent inside of it to get the mosquitoes out that were over there, and zipped it all up. And if you weren't tired, you just laid there because you couldn't stand to be outside. They were just tremendous. You could hear them off in the woods, and as soon as it got dark, here they came. Now these also come with an annex that can be used also just to get in, crawl in out of the rain, and to put your gear in there. There's several different styles. I lived in Wyoming for a couple years and did about every weekend. Was doing some type of outdoor activity, either camping up to Bighorn Mountains or over to Black Hills. Sometimes we just go out into the prairie grasslands and find a little water hole and camp up at that area. But we were always listening during summer to the reports of all the state national parks in the area. And they had one that came up from Glacier National Park on 2 different occasions where 2 couples in one party and one couple in another party were camping at different times. But the women were attacked in every situation by grizzly bears. And the only way the men got hurt was trying to protect the women from these grizzly bears. They came to find out after they did some more investigation of this that every one of the women that was attacked by grizzly was on their period. So that was one thing that they really started to stipulate, was that if a woman was in that condition, not to go into bear country, because they were having a real bad time that summer with one particular grizzly, which they did finally, after reports came out, said they captured and took him back up to the high country. But there's always something that once you think you've got it all figured out, something else comes up and makes you wonder, how can you solve these problems? I thought it was interesting watching the program on TV on the Kodiaks in Alaska, and how now, instead of fencing in the bears so you can watch them, they fence you in. And they have chain link fence with barbed wire strung all around them that you go into and you set up your tents and you camp, and then during the day you can go out and watch the bears fish for salmon along the rivers. And I thought, well, that was a nice little twist. Well, I thought also it was nice that they had those set up too. Now in these tents, these are umbrella tents. This is one style. There's several different styles of these. If you notice, almost every one from now on that will show, including the backpacker, have almost full rain flies. If you have one of those umbrella tents, I'm sure you've seen them maybe set up somewhere where the umbrella only comes down to here. We found that when we use that type, that if you get a nice driving rain, it'll just spray right through the nylon tent. And then you get quite a bit of moisture in, then you're miserable. But if you try to get one with a good full rain fly, one style here has one that drapes over all but the entrance. You can find some of those tents also. Most of these are 3-season tents, which means spring, summer, and fall. You can find some of these that are set up for 4-season tent camping. But some of them come with a screen tent, screen room right in front of them, where you can set up lawn chairs, your camp stools, and sit out at night and not be bothered by the insects. Others just come with a canopy that helps you stay out of the rain. Next, you have the geodesic dome type expedition tents. These are the ones you see on all the programs where they've tried to conquer Everest or K2 or some of these other mountains. They have a lot of times these style of tents. The reason for the geodesic dome is that they use it a lot because of its shape. It's a nice dome that its structure set up to where any direction the wind hits it, it's going to have can take the same load on that side of the tent. So if the wind's 360 degrees around them, that tent can hold up to that. They're not a real fancy tent, and usually they run a little small as far as what you can get size-wise. Usually a 2 to 3 man geodesic dome tent is about standard. They're excellent 4-season tent, especially for extremes. And they all come with a rain fly over the top of them also. Now the tents I like. Now these I like for summer long-term camping. These are your cabin tents. They have nice tall sidewalls, usually 4 or 5 foot tall, and you get 6.5, 7 foot headroom in them. There's several styles. Some of them are big enough that they have a room divider in. They have generally a canvas top to them that is really nice. Canvas will shed water, in my opinion, a lot better than a nylon will, and you don't necessarily need a rain fly for them. A lot of them will come then with your dining area built right into they call them a 2-room tent, but the front portion where the screen tent dining area is, there's no floor in them, and primarily you just use that for taking your food in to eat and get away from the bugs. Then there's some of them that have 3-room. They'll be divided on both sides with the main walk-in. And there you throw all your gear and you sleep on both sides of it. Big family tent. They're nice. Now we get to more of the rustic types, but as far as I'm concerned, winter camping, you can't beat a good campus tent. When I was a boy in Scouts, all we had were big, heavy wall tents that would hold 2 or 3 boys. If you go, I know some of you here I've talked to have gone to scout camp before. That's what a lot of scout camps would have set up for you. Used to be they'd have a wood platform. If you go to the state parks, rent-a-tent programs that they have there that you can rent a tent. They're a nice big wall tent with a wooden platform, and there's also off to the side a place that they give you a cook stove and a cook kit, and all you got to do is bring your cooler in with your food and your clothing, and your camping experience is all set up for you. They're real nice. Tippecanoe River State Park up by Winnemac has that. And a lot of times, though, it's filled up pretty quick during the summer months. So if you want to use one, you have to get there, make reservations. There's a pyramid. What we have is called an overnighter. Real nice, simple tent to put up. You stake the four corners of your pyramid. You crawl in with your upright pole and just push it on up and your tent's set up. It's probably one of the quickest setups of a canvas tent that you'll find. The shape of it, of course, being a pyramid, sheds water real well. The only thing is, most of these, almost all of them don't have any floors in them, so you have to put ground cloths down and mosquito netting. None of them will have mosquito netting. Normally what you do is you go out and buy yourself some mosquito netting and make up something to cover up your sleeping bag with, and that'll work real well. We've done that before. Camper tent is a nice small tent, usually 2-3 people, and it's got a small opening to it, which is nice. It has a good windbreak all around except for the small opening. Most of these you attach right to the ground with your stakes, and then you have a couple upright poles that you use to stake them up. The Baker tents are a good all-around winter camping tent that we like to use. And the reason for it is you can take 4 of those, and at each corner of your fly you can connect the next one until you go around and make 4 sides using those Baker tents. And they're 8 feet across, so you have an 8-foot by 8-foot opening in the middle of them. And 2 weeks from Friday, we were at Buffalo and made this arrangement with our Baker tents. On the side where the opening is, that the wind is blowing in, we just took a couple pieces of canvas and enclosed those areas in. If anybody remembers what weekend before last was, it started out about 40 degrees raining. Tents went up real nice, got the stakes in the ground real easy, and then the cold front came through. Wind chill factors next day at 35 below zero. We had a nice roaring fire in the middle of it, and we couldn't keep people out of it. They'd get in, and it was at least 10-15 degrees warmer in that area than it was outside of the tent area. And plus, being the way we had set up a nice windbreak helped also. That first night I got down to about 15. The second night, sleeping in there with the fire going and reflecting off the flaps of this tent arrangement, got down to 5 degrees. And the boys had absolutely no problem sleeping that night. I had a hard time Sunday morning getting them up because they get so nice and cozy. The only problem was when we drove stakes into the ground on Friday night, they immediately froze solid. And it took us an hour to get all our tents down clean. It took us an hour and a half to get the stakes out of the ground. And I got to stay. I'll show you one here in a little bit what happens to them. But these are great tents. They're nice. If you can find a good heavy canvas tent, it's excellent. Now we go to my favorite part, the dining flies. Places where you sit to eat. There's all different shapes and sizes. There's the dome styles. Most of them are square. There's external frames and internal frames. The best ones that I've found are the ones where they have a piece of canvas or another piece of nylon that will block out one side or 2 sides. This is your major accessory along with your tent. If you're going to dive into camping and really want to do it, a screen tent has to be your other accessory along with your regular tent. It's a place to get into to where you can cook and get out of the bugs, sit and eat a decent meal, and still watch scenery all the way around. Yes?
Are those a lot less expensive, or they run about the same as tents?
They're actually sometimes a little bit more.
More?
Yeah, about the same, a little more. It's like this tent here, we spent $130 for it, and I bought a nice Eureka dining fly, 12 by 12, and it ran me $240. But I found that I don't really want to be biased, but Eureka for the money on your, it's actually called the lower end camping equipment. And for the money you spend on it, they're well worth it. There's some that have just 2 sides enclosed. Some of them have a fly that you have to go outside and drop, but it'll be all the way around all 4 sides. Some don't come with anything. The only thing you have protecting you when it rains is that little top. Found that there can be problems with that because it's usually the top is a lot smaller than the base. So once you get in there and figure out where it is, a lot of times we'll put our coolers and stuff that can take water damage along the edges, and then we stay right in the middle of it, put the picnic table right in the middle, and you're fine. An experience. Year before last, up in Minnesota, the wife and I and the kids go up for a week or 2 every year in northern Minnesota, and we tent camp and do some fishing up in the Chippewa National Forest area. And we had a little visitor one night. The wife, we were always careful to put our food up and our scraps. Food always went in the van at night because we always saw bear. We didn't want to mess with those. But the wife had left a little pot of pancakes and egg shells. And we had just gotten to bed, got the kids settled down, and all of a sudden we hear this ruckus in our dining fly. We had a dining fly similar to this. The edges of it tuck under. So you got a flap all the way around the inside of it. And then it's just bare ground on the inside. We heard this noise out there, and the wife says, well, go out there and see what it is. Because we'd had some raccoons running around. Well, I get out there, and here's this black thing with a white stripe down the middle of it. Messing around, getting his head down the can and stuff, and I thought, oh my God, you know, we've only been here 3 days. We'll be here another 10, and I don't want to get stinking real bad. So I get my vehicle out so I can really see what he's doing, pull it up, and shine the lights on. Well, with the flap tucked under, he could get in, but he couldn't get out. And every time I went around, it was like the Indianapolis 500. He was around and around and around and around. I go, now, you know, how in the world do you ever get this thing out of here without getting sprayed? So I'm sitting there contemplating, and next thing I know, the tent unzips, the wife comes out with the broom, she unzips the other side, and there goes the skunk right by her. And I go, I stood out here 15 minutes trying to figure out how to do it. She just walked out and shoos it out. But I did warn her, though, that if she ever got sprayed, she was going to find another place to camp. And the next one I have is on canopies. Canopies are nice. You can do just about anything with them other than what I've shown here. Before I go on, you want to take a break?
Sure.
Okay. I'll finish up.
We'll take our break and then come back. And we'll convene here in about 10 minutes. Okay?
First time I ever went camping, I should write a bookmark called Tempting for Dummies. Because I had unfortunately not had Mark's lecture, and there were 4 of us. We were between 19 and 21, and we decided to go up to the Boundary Waters. The only smart thing we did on that trip was not take a gun. Anyway, we couldn't read maps that well, and it got to be 1 or 2 in the morning, and we thought we should be at Ely by now, and we weren't, but there were just lots of woods and stuff, so we put up our tent in the dark, which took us forever to get it up, and we were scaring each other. We were 4 city boys from Chicago with stories about bears and everything. And there were 4 young men sleeping in a 2-man tent. So anyway, we went in, zipped up, and went to sleep kind of scared. It was the first night out for any of us in the woods, and somewhere around 3 in the morning, one of us, all 4 of us have denied that he did this, but lets out a terrible scream, there's a bear in the tent. Well, 4 guys immediately jumped up, and of course the tent went down. We ripped 4 new openings out of the tent, you know, as we headed out, and as we convened later, of course, and tried to look at the damage, it's still pitch dark. There are no bear tracks around or anything. And what I guess happened, somebody's arm flipped over somebody else and was having a dream about bears. who was sure was a bear grabbed the bear. And then, of course, when you got 4 people waking up out of sleep trying to wrestle. Anyway, I wish I'd had your lecture then, Mark.
One of the hardest things, Mark, for those of us who like to reminisce, is that everything that you said, I thought, oh my God, he knows what I'm thinking. I went camping in Yellowstone Park in one of those wonderful tents with the kitchens on the front and the sleeping compartment in the back. We still got that tent. Woke up the next morning and the front screen was ripped. And my wife said, "What ripped that tent?" And I followed your advice. I sewed it up very quickly. And I said, "See, it's that man's dog over there." He got up there and ripped it.
Quick thinking.
Quit thinking. So that night I made sure that there was no food in the tent and everything was cool. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, as Jim said, we hear this. And I thought, oh my God. And I grabbed my big knife and I zipped it open, and there was the biggest bear I had ever seen. And he was inside the tent in the front portion. And I had my wife and I had 2 kids in the back part. So I figured he was either going to go or I was going to make another door in the back of that tent with this knife. So I yelled and he ran. That night the Mexican man next door lost his cheese and bacon. Bears can open coolers.
Oh, yeah.
No, don't mess with bears, man. They want the cooler. You say, "Here, bear, take this cooler. I don't care. Whatever you want."
Yeah. Yep.
Go right ahead.
So just to add to that too, like I mentioned, I believe the first meeting was whenever you're in bear country and you leave your campsite area, unzip your tent. If a bear wants to come into camp and look in your tent, he doesn't care if the door's zipped open or zip closed or not. He'll get in your tent. So just always leave your door unzipped and let whatever roam in and out wants to. It's better than coming back and finding your tent all ripped up and then trying to fight mosquitoes and everything else in that night. Also, even though we camp in something like this, my wife has a 15-minute ritual before we go to bed. She'll go in and she'll lift up the air mattress and the sleeping bag and she'll check for spiders and bugs, and she'll put the air mattress down and look underneath the sleeping bags and she'll check all underneath there, and then she'll lay the sleeping bags down and open them up and she'll check all over the inside of there. Just to make sure there's no spiders or bugs or nothing in there. And I said, well, it's been closed up all day. Bug would have to be about that big to get into it. But she just makes her feel more comfortable doing something like that. Let's get back now to our canopy style camping equipment. These are normally, you can use the plastic tarps, work real well with this. Also, there's a good canvas that I'll show you here in a minute that makes a nice dining fly canopy. They're labor intensive to put up, as you can see. I haven't been able to really put one up by myself without a lot of struggle and time involved. But once they're up, I've camped in wilderness camping areas at state parks where pretty tree barren, and it makes a great place for shade. There's several styles. The ones where you attach it at the corners and have an uprights in the middle with a ridgepole across. You can also set this type up if you do have trees, just by putting a rope between 2 trees and throwing it over the rope and then staking it out, and you have yourself a nice little canopy. There's some that, the one with the center pole works nice. Found out when we use ours is we take the bottom poles off, slide a picnic table underneath and just set the pole around top of the picnic table. And that way then you have your picnic table underneath your canopy, and it's all set up properly. There's a parafoil type that doesn't take a ridge pole, just takes 2 poles and you just stake it out. take out your poles, and then the corners come out. The only problem is it really restricts your headroom. Then there are the fancy types that you see sometimes at the garden shops will have them, or for yard furniture. As it says here, allow 30 to 45 minutes for setup. A lot of poles go with it. Every edge seems to have a pole that you have to put up in order to stretch this piece of canvas or plastic over the top of it. But it's freestanding. It's about the only one you'll find that'll be freestanding. You can move it wherever you want, as long as you got 4 people, one on each corner. Move it around. And I just found a couple miscellaneous I thought was interesting. The vehicle tents, they do make vehicle tents that attach to the back of station wagons, minivans, pickup trucks, and that way it increases your area for storage and sleeping by using your vehicle also. The only problem is that the closure around your vehicle, if you need to go somewhere, it will come off and close up, but then you have to back it in and hook it back up again every time you want to go out and mess around. But if you just don't plan on using your vehicle, it's a nice little setup. Also, I found one that there is a tent. I don't know how good it is, but it's just comes big round package, and you just flip it out and pops open, and there's your tent. As you can see, it starts out as a hoop, and then it starts to unfold, and then you have the zipper opening, probably 1 or 2 feet. Fair weather, nice warm summer type, something you want to try in your backyard first before you go anywhere with it. And that's primarily all the basic tents, canopies, screen tents, dining flies, that kind of stuff that would get you started. Like I said, your camping, the type of camping you want to do determines what tents you want. If you're a family camper, you can probably haul a little bit more equipment. You'll want it to put your family in and have them be comfortable. There's nothing worse than having 2 or 3 children running around that are wet and miserable and want to go home and you just set up camp. So you got to keep in mind exactly what you want to do. I kind of go the whole gamut. I go all the way from the minimal type camping, like I think I mentioned last time, was a couple years ago in February, camped out in the ground, laid newspaper down, ground cloth, air mattress, put my sleeping bag on top, threw the ground cloth over the top of it after digging out 6 inches of snow, and that's where I slept for the weekend. That was my shelter. One night got to 5 below. And if you set it all up right, know what to wear to bed, your shelter, just that little minimal amount of shelter kept me warm all evening. It can be done. I had 8 other scouts with me. They built rustic shelters. As Walt had mentioned, lean-to types, built fires in front of them, and that's what they stayed in at 5 below zero. They did it. Nobody, as a matter of fact, I had a hard time next day getting them out of their warm sleeping bags, which I didn't blame them really, because if I hadn't had to get out that morning, I probably would have stayed in there myself. But it was better to water the outside than water the inside, so I got out. I wanted to go through some types of accessories that you might want to take with you. Stakes. Most of your tents will come with a pack of stakes. Personally, I don't like them. They come with these plastic jars, and usually that's the way mine look after about 3 years, because I never take them out of the bag. They flex too much, and if you hit rocks with them, you can pop the heads off of them, and they're a real mess sometimes. But I've seen a lot of people like you. Maybe I just don't know how to use them, but Normally, I can't get them in the ground unless I use a metal hammer. There's all different kinds of stakes that you can get. You wrap up steel stakes in an old sock. What I found is that helps, especially if you roll your stakes up with your tent and you find out the wire has poked out through a little plastic package and then it's poked into your tent. But if you wrap it up in a sock, it seems to help keep them from doing that. Boy, they're hard to get out. Washers. Washers use washers on the ends of them to keep the ropes from coming off. So I can get one of these out. But you can have aluminum stakes that I like. They're heavier gauge aluminum. And these are made to be pushed in by hand. You don't really want to drive a stake like this. Aluminum stake, you'll bend that hook clear over and then it's a real bear. Sounds good though, doesn't it? Chines. You can go up and buy some pole barn spikes. And if you get the right size washers, you can slide them on and they make a real nice tent stake. They're pretty inexpensive. Usually buy them by the pound and you just go and get a handful of them for $4 or $5, great big old handful of them. And you always have extra stakes then. Just like I was mentioning tonight, this tent I had loaned out to a father of a Cub Scout that wanted to go on a Cub Scout outing, and came back and I noticed it smelled a little musty and remembered it did rain. He gave it back to me and hadn't dried it out. I checked the stakes and I'm missing a stake. So it's always nice to have a bag of extra stakes laying around. They get lost real easy in the grass. But there's all different sizes of the nails you can get. And, I just kind of collect, whatever's available at the time. Go up and I'll try these. Fortunately, I'm in a situation where I can make my own stakes. These are a heavy gauge wire, and I just had the guys cut me a bunch. I made 110 of these stakes, and just put them in a vise, spin them around. These are super tent stakes. I made variable lengths, and I just bundle them up, packages of 12, and throw a package in our camp box every time we go, just in case somebody loses some. And as Walt showed you before, these kind of stakes, all different kinds. These were, I believe, done with oak planking. And you just set up a little jig and just start cutting them out. Usually get 2 of them, lay the other one the other way, and rip it down through, and then cut your notches in. You can make up a bag full of these in a pretty good time. What you want to use is, you can buy these in the store. They're plastic hammer. If you use a metal hammer on these, you tend to flare the tops out of them before you know if they're not any good. They'll split right on down, and you've ruined a real good oak stake. Use something soft. We use a bowling pin also, works real well. You can find an old bowling pin somewhere. Or make yourself up a wood mallet, because wood on wood seems to work real well. And these, I highly recommend if you're going to use a camping type tent. They're what I call sand stakes. It's kind of odd when I have the boys go around, we're putting one up for the first time. And I say, now angle your stake in. And the next thing I know, it's angled right towards the tent. Well, you always want to angle them in the opposite direction of your tent. If you put them in this way, I find out the stakes will pull on up. You want to put the groove side towards your canopy, so it adds a little more pressure to it, won't pull them up. These are real handy. These are Army surplus. They're a little more expensive in the stores to buy the sand stakes. So you spend $1, $2 a piece for those. So you usually get just enough to work with at the time. Now, I always like to have a good variety of poles. We make these up. These are just staves that have a nail in the end of it. Take the head off of it, and when you put up your dining flies, the grommet just sits right on top of them, and then just run your rope right on down to it. Fortunately, again, where I work, they use a fiberglass rod in one of their operations, in their baling operations, so I just cut them off the length I wanted, machined the end of it off, and ran a socket-head cap screw down the end of it. And it makes a nice hiking pole, too, if you ever need one. But these always come in handy for putting up dining flies, repairing your tents if you need something to hold part of your tent up because it's part of it's been wrecked in a storm. They come in real handy. Now what I found too, you can buy pieces and parts. If you want your dining fly, you just go out and buy yourself, this is a 9x12 tarp. I always look for something with reinforced grommet holes on it. And it's got nylon cord down through it. Really inexpensive too. I think it was under $20 for this. But if you really want to go to something that's going to last, this is a 12x16 dining fly, and it's heavy. But it's nice double stitched. It's got good grommets on it, and it's well waterproofed. Taken care of, these will last years and years. But the way these are set up, to make things easy, I don't like to carry a lot of long poles. Most of your tents will come with the shock cord poles. Where someone was asking me about the poles on this one. Well, they shock cord down to where they're about this long. They just unfold, and you put them into the sheath that goes into the next one. You just keep going across. But when you're putting up a dining fly, I like to use these types of telescopic poles, and you just raise them on up to the height you want after everything's up, and then adjust it as you need to. Now we use a set of these on the ends, and then we have a ridge pole that you can put together, and then it telescopes out to whatever length you need. And these are real handy. It's a good heavy aluminum. The dining fly canvas runs that size 12x16 will run about $50. And the poles, this whole set was about $30. So you have $80 in a real nice heavy duty dining fly that's going to last you a long time. What I found over the years is the old saying, you get what you pay for. And if you're going to go out and buy something inexpensive, that's usually what's going to happen to it. It'll end up being something inexpensive. Oh, and here's the ones I prefer most than anything. Usually $1 a piece for these. Steel stakes, but they got the nice molded head on them. You can use a hammer to drive them in. This is what happens when they get buried in frozen ground, trying to get them out. You can't bend them with your bare hands, so imagine the force it took to bend this one over. And boys can do it. If you can't think it'll be done, have a Boy Scout try it. He can do it. You can bend it, break it, do whatever you want with it. I always like to take extra rope of any kind. These are nylon ropes. They still have the rope tighteners on them. I always like to take an extra set of these just in case one gets frayed or broken, and I'll go ahead and replace it. You can take all different kinds of rope. I like to use 1/4-inch rope. Most of all, it's heavy duty. I can use it for any purpose, clothesline. You can even put this across for your dining fly and drape it over that. It comes also nylon, works well. It's that nylon stretches, so more so than the sisal rope will. So I don't like to use it as much, and it's a little harder to keep a knot in nylon. Some knots want to slip out of nylon. So I'll go to the sisal ropes.
He just said something that's important. He said a sisal rope. The original rope that everyone used around the world was made of
Hemp.
hemp.
Yeah, if you can
And
find
during
me some
World
hemp
War
rope, I'll
II,
take it.
You couldn't get hemp because the Japanese had the Philippine Islands. So the farmers around here planted marijuana, which was also used, and marijuana rope was available, except now we can't get it killed. It keeps growing. He didn't say marijuana rope, you notice.
No.
Yes.
But, yeah, they also mentioned too on the hemp, they'd like to start growing it again because some of the tall ships for the riggings, they're using the sisal and it doesn't last, but the hemp will last forever.
Hemp is, if you keep hemp oiled,
Yeah.
a rope will last forever, indefinitely.
We have ropes we use for monkey bridge that are an inch and 3/4, an inch in diameter and 3/4 diameter, that it's an old hemp rope that, how old would you say that rope is? 40 years old?
My grandfather had it.
Yeah, so, but it's still going. Anytime we have a fray or break in it, we just in-splice it together and make it as good as new because we don't want to get rid of that rope. Some of the knots I like to use, well, there's only 2 knots that I like to use for camping. And the one is the bowline, and it's a nice easy knot, and it's the one I use to clasp on top of all my poles to run down to use the use the other one, but it's just a loop, and we call it our rabbit through the hole around the tree knot. But all you do is you make your hole for your rabbit, run your rabbit up around, through the hole, around the tree, back through, and it's a non-slip loop. And I've seen a lot of times where they'll use 2 half hitches or a slip knot and run it right on up, and then it rains and your rope swells and you got to cut the knot out of it. But if you use this knot and just slip it over, and then it's real easy to take out. The old saying in Scout says, if we tie a knot, you've done it right if you can take it apart real easy. The other one is the top line, and if I could have you stand up for a minute. Just hold your hand clear up like that. Okay. Grab that one. Okay. Now, I need you want to come up and stand over here? And I'll have you just step on that end. Let's see if I can get it clean up. Sit back a little bit. Okay. Now, when you tie this one, it's really just 2 loops under and 1 loop over. When you have a top line, if I can get this to move. There we go. Okay, pull. Okay, it won't move. Now, if you let up a little pressure, you can slide it, and then, I'll just have you hold it there. And then pull again, and it'll stay. But then as soon as you let up a little bit on it, you can pull it right on back. Same way going forward. I can bring it right on up. And that's a great knot also for a clothesline.
Mark, here again. I missed something.
It's actually 2 half hitches under and 1 half hitch over.
Yeah, I just don't know what else to do.
All right, you just start out. Just wrap your rope around twice,
Okay.
and then come on up and make another half hitch at the top. What it creates friction then once you got pressure on it. It won't pull down, but as soon as you loosen up on it, it'll slide. Real nice knot. Everybody should know how to tie that if you're going camping. Okay, thanks. Good job. Thank you. Right now I have agave handouts. These handouts I have here are on the talk that Walt just gave Copied off a bunch of stuff for the wilderness survival shelters. Interesting stuff. We thought you might be interested in it. Also, I found some stuff on Camping Extras and made copies. It has use zero, some cooking, some more cooking stuff. Most of it's utensils cooking, and some camping gadget stuff that it's fun around the campsite to do. Pass those around. Briefly through this, shows how to build a monkey bridge. In March, we'll have a monkey bridge set up. Anybody wants to come and try their luck on that? All kinds of knots, how to make rope. Practice knot boards, there's some lessons. The cooking has all kinds of gadgets. How to do brown bag biscuits, how to cook bacon in a bag over fire, paper bag. How to skewer an egg and roast it over the fire. All kinds of shelters, recipes, more recipes. Then at the back, you get into some camp gadgets. I've actually just made some up at home and just throw them in when we go camping all the time, use the same camp gadgets. There's some neat things in there. Thought you might be interested. Also, on the inside front cover, I've stapled a card in there if anybody would like to contact me. Or if you want to get a hold of Walt or anybody through me, you can. I have my phone number there. Any respect to camping or scouts or other questions you might think of later. And Kim, that's all I have.
Hey, Mark.
Yes.
Do you have any little things that show you how to tie the knot, like in an easier way?
Yeah, I do have some books on knot tying. I can have them brought to the next lecture. You guys can take a look at them.
Yeah, this is.
Okay. I have to, in about 25 minutes, kind of recap everything that Walt and Mark has talked about and give you some new ideas and some new thoughts and some new directions. And that's a tough nut to crack, isn't it? That's my cartoon. That's all the wit you're going to get out of me tonight. Walt talked about using DEET for mosquito repellent. You can buy DEET in a liquid form, it's 100% concentration. But you must be aware that small children are very sensitive. So this 100% concentration, you want to use it sparingly on small children. They can develop a severe allergic reaction. Mosquito repellent inside of tents does destroy the waterproofing of tents. Okay, tents. Tents have been around for, how long have people been around? 1,000 years, 2,000 years, 10,000 years? I don't know how long people have been walking the earth, but we have had tents that long. And when we stop and think about the American Indian, the teepee that Walt showed you on his chart, that was merely a product of what that people, that race, had as natural resources. They had the poles, they had the hides, they come up with a teepee. There is an advantage to the teepee. Can somebody tell me what it is? Quickly. What?
When you have a fire, the smoke.
Yep. You're right. But we have fireplaces in today's homes and the smoke goes up. The teepee has an advantage. We have to remember what the climate was that the American Indians dealt with out in the plains. Wind. All the time wind. The biggest bane of our pioneering ladies was the wind, because it dried out the skin, the faces, the hands. You take a cone, you take a paper cup that's a cone, you've seen them, you pull them out in a little cone, you put one upside down on the table and try to blow it over. They won't blow over. Almost impossible to blow a teepee over. It's one of the advantages. Natural resources is what people use to make their shelters. There's a whole lot of education, trial and error. In Eastern Europe, steppes of Russia, Genghis Khan, he built a shelter. These people used shelters, made shelters, much as what Walt showed you on his charts, called the wickiup, or the log home, or the roundhouse. Natural resources, just a basic framework, throw some hides over it, they have a shelter. Natural resources is what people use. So, tents that you see up here is merely a byproduct of today's society. Nylon. We didn't have nylon, much of it, during World War II. So, it's natural resources, what's available to us. There's as many different kind of tents, and more so than we have people in this room tonight. The kind of tent that you're going to purchase, whether it's going to be something like this, an Army surplus for maybe $30, or something like this for maybe $200, just depends on how deep your pocket is. That's what it depends on. I will say this, buy the absolute best tent you can get if that's what you want to do. You can buy tents from $30 to several $1,000. It's up to you. It's how deep that pocket is. Natural shelters. Our pioneers out in Nebraska, they built houses out of sod. We all in school, we all saw those pictures. Sod homes, some of them still stand. Out in the Southwest, we built homes, shelters out of adobe, bricks. Rectangular, round, whatever you want to build, it's up to you. Natural resources is what is used in shelter situations. Okay, so much from tents, so much on beat. There's 4 basic things that you need to consider in a, quote, survival situation. I gotta pick. Man, you get in the car to go to the mall, what's the first thing you do?
Check to make sure I have my purse.
You got your purse, that's survival. How about you? You get in the car, you got your purse, you check the gas gauge, you got gas, I got $2 in my purse, what's the next thing you do?
I start the car and go.
Okay, you failed. What do you do? You lock your door, survival. What do you do? Anybody, what's the next thing you do after you get in the car and lock the door? Seatbelts. Survival. That's all it is. Survival in a car with a seatbelt on. You have, let me put it this way. How many have seen the movie with Steve McQueen and Cool Hand Luke? Cool Hand Luke. Remember one of his expressions? What we have here is an attitude problem, right? Survival, half of the battle of survival is attitude. You get in the car, you lock the door, you fasten the seatbelt. That's survival. That says that you have an attitude that's conducive to survival in just about whatever situation you're in. Ladies, you're going to go up to Chicago. You're going to spend the weekend. You're going to go shopping. You're going to go to the Gold Coast. You get one of these big elevators in these high-rise buildings. What's the consideration? Mugging? Somebody gets in the elevator with you, where should you be standing? Right next to the control panel. If somebody gets on, you're uncomfortable, and this person attempts something, what do you want to do? Press the what button? You want to press every button on the control panel that you can get at. Because that means the elevator is going to stop at every floor, not one. See what I'm saying? Survival is attitude. How many of you have jumped in the car and gone down to Tippecanoe Mall, middle of winter, gonna go Christmas shopping? It's 20 above zero outside. Moms, little kids in the car, nothing to eat, nothing to drink, nothing to stay warm, if they have a problem. We don't even think about it. Walt had a little survival pack here. He had something to drink, he had something to eat, he had something to provide heat. That little candle at 0 degrees, in a 0 degree environment, is sufficient to raise the temperature 1 degree. Now you put that little candle in a car, which is very tight, with body heat, at 0 degrees, you just raise the temperature 12 degrees. 12 degrees is the difference between life and death in some cases. A blanket. How many of you have something like this in your cars? A lot of women. One guy. My daughter has something like this. She uses a coffee can. Something to drink, something to eat, something to stay warm. That coffee can serves as a place to melt some snow or some ice. Okay. What's the second most important thing in a survival situation? Now, survival can mean stranded alongside the road. It can mean a tornado, a flood, airplane crash, thermonuclear war, terrorist activities. This is today's society. We're not 150 years ago. Today's society is where we live. So, our survival depends on what we have available to us today. What is the second most important thing for survival in today's society? Now, we talked about attitude. It's knowledge. It's knowledge. Now, attitude and knowledge will generate almost a 90% success rate in a survival situation. Several years ago, we had a young couple, a little bitty baby, carried him in their arms, set out from, I think it was San Francisco, going to go up and see Grandma about Christmas time. Wound up through the mountains, got lost, got caught in a snowstorm. Remember this in the paper here a couple of years ago? They got out of the truck and started. They found a cave. Mom and the baby stayed in the cave. The father, 22 years old, he walked and he found help and he brought it back. They were outdoors about a week. They did everything wrong going. But once they had a problem, they did every single thing right. By accident, but they did it right. They took the wrappings off of dry cleaning bags and wrapped it around their legs, put them around their feet. They stopped loss of body heat. They did have some munchies in the car. I think it was cheese curls or something like that. Best thing they could have done was stayed in the car. But they got out and walked. The adults did lose some fingers and toes. The baby come out fine. Did you remember reading that? They did everything right once they realized they had a problem. But they did everything wrong setting out. You just think about that. 200 or 300 miles in the mountains with snow and nothing in the car to eat, nothing in the car to drink, nothing in the car to keep warm in. And nobody knew where they're going. They didn't even give the route to anybody. Everything wrong, but they did everything right when they realized they had a problem. So, a survival situation depends on your attitude and then your knowledge. We can only give you a little bit. We can't give you everything. That's up to you folks. Now, moms have really a better instinctive reaction to a survival situation than men do. Been proven through 100 different military studies. Moms will come out better than men in survival situations. It's whatever moms have. So, tents from a historical point of view is what is available to the people at the time and the situation they're in. We talked about snow caves, burrowing inside a snowbank. We talked about teepees, earth shelters, trenches, anything to get out of the wind. Shelter does nothing but protect you from the wind, the rain, perhaps some snow, and then little no-see-ums and flying teeth and mosquitoes. If there is a long-term camp, long-term, you're going to be outdoors for a couple, 3, 4 weeks. What is a very important consideration, and we have all these tents, and we've got water bottles, and we've got all these things. So what is something we don't want to forget to do while we're at camp? We talked about bears, get inside of sleeping bags. Hygiene. Good, solid hygiene. Now, you may not be able to take a shower every day. You may not have a shower for a month. The only thing that's going to create is maybe someone that you're close to will move a little further away. But good hygiene is terribly important. It reduces infection. In a survival situation, that's what will get you in trouble, is infection. Whether it's eyes, ears, teeth, toes, hands, injuries. I went to Feast of the Hunter's Moon one year, and the theme was native, the women that followed the fur trappers. They said the average age was 35 years old. And most of the women, the camp followers, had less than 3 fingers on each hand, because they lost it to the use of axes and knives, chopping wood. Now, if we chop a finger off here today, we don't think too much about it. We grab the finger, a bucket of ice, and go see the doctor. But now you're in an outdoors situation. What do? You're holding a stupid piece of kindling, and you're going to whack on it, get a fire started, and cut a finger off. It's consideration, folks. How are you going to handle it? With a good attitude and some knowledge, you can solve that problem. Or very simply, you're going to bleed to death, you're going to lose a finger, or you're going to die. That's simple. Attitude and knowledge solves those problems. Soap. Anybody here ever make soap? Ashes? Wash the ashes, the wood ashes, add some lard or grease or whatever. That's the basic ingredients of soap. That kind of soap, this country has made tons and tons of it 7,500 years ago. But there was one thing wrong with that soap. You remember what it was? It dried the skin out. Dries the skin out, exposes the skin to infection. Add horseradish to that soap, because horseradish has an antiseptic quality to it. Hygiene is terribly important in camping. Just as important camping as it is at home. Perhaps more important if it's a survival situation. With knowledge, you know how. Go out and do it. Go out and practice it. We talked about setting this. I'll bet $1 to my donut that it will take 5 people here, excluding Mark, myself, and Walt, and Dr. Rayler, maybe a couple of you other guys. It takes an hour and a half to get this tent apart. I said a couple other people. Go out and buy a tent. Mark said, first thing you do, you pull the tent out, dump the box upside down, look, see you got everything, put it up. You set that tent up 5 times, man. You got it down where you can set that tent up in 15 minutes. Easy. You go out. Friday, we're going to go camping. We're going to go down a turkey run, an hour and a half drive. We get down there, the campground's kind of full, and they put us way back in the corner where the street lights don't work. Now we're going to set this tent up in the dark, and I'll guarantee you one thing. You didn't buy that tent, and you've never seen it before in your life. You'll never get it up after an hour and a half, even a little tent like this. Things change in the dark. So, set your tent up in the daytime, set the tent up at nighttime. I guarantee you, you'll be setting that tent up sometime in the dark. You want to know which end is which? Things change in the dark. Directions change in the dark. So, what have we looked at here? We've looked at survival from a short-term to a long-term situation. The ingredients necessary for a good high rate of survival is attitude, knowledge, and practice. Don't forget the hygiene. You use the bathroom, wash your hands. You cook, wash your hands. You shake hands, wash your hands. I'm serious. Hygiene is terribly important in camping, especially in the tropical zones, southwest, where the temperature is warm and humid. Now in the Midwest, well, you can back that off a little bit. If water is a consideration, if water is an important consideration to you, don't throw it out. Use it, reuse it, and reuse it. You boil your food in it, don't throw the water out. Wash your dishes in it, don't throw it out. A week from now, you may want to use that cooking water to take a strip bath. It's important. Water is critical to you. Consideration is, where's my water source? Here in the Midwest, not too much of a problem. But if, well, Monon had a problem here. They asked all the people, 1,500 people, to boil the water. Why would we want to boil water? To kill the infection, kill the germ. Okay, I'm going to tell you one other little thing, and we'll take a couple questions. Because Mark only left me 3 more minutes. Dig, where'd Mark go?
He's hiding.
He's hiding. Okay. And I think that Dr. Ayler will bear this out. I think. So I'm going to find out too. I've read in numerous studies, numerous cases, both here in the States and overseas, from the early West to the present, in a survival situation and you have no access to what basically you have on, maybe a few things in your pockets. What's a good antiseptic?
Saliva.
It's not the answer I'm looking for. What's a good antiseptic?
Urine?
Urine. Why? Why urine?
I would think it'd be the opposite because it's getting rid of.
Because it has an acid in it. Uric? Uric acid is in urine. Little stupid things like that, folks, can mean the difference between life and less than life. Misery. You know, these old-timers, these fur traders, these Indians, they did not like to be uncomfortable in the woods, or in the plains, or in the fields, or in the mountains. This was their home. They wanted to be comfortable. They learned how to be comfortable. Biggest thing we fight here today in the Midwest in the summertime is mosquitoes, right? And we've got 59,000 different products on the market to fight mosquitoes. I can sit on the front porch in a pair of cutoffs, nothing else. My wife can sit out there the way we're dressed tonight, and I guarantee you she'll have 14 mosquito bites and I won't have any. They don't bother me. They bother my wife. Why? Hairspray, body cologne. All of these things attract. Good hygiene takes care of that. Now the American Indian will, I've read where the American Indian has said the reason the white folks are bothered with mosquitoes because we eat so much salt. They didn't really have a salty diet. I don't know if that has anything to do with it. But I haven't used salt in 15 years. My wife still uses it. She's bothered and I'm not. So I don't know what the answer is on mosquitoes. But I do know that good hygiene reduces the amount of mosquitoes that will come towards you. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I
can tell you why the mosquitoes bother the women more than they do the men. The women have the estrogen in their blood, it's only the female mosquitoes that bite, and they need that stuff to make the eggs that they're carrying.
That's interesting, I've never heard that before. Never heard that. Any comments, thoughts, questions? You gals haven't ever made soap? You're the only one that's made soap?
We did in chemistry class, but that's.
You made soap? I was 5 years old, I had to learn how to make soap. I mean, there is so much material out there, folks, it's up to you to get it. I would recommend highly one book, the Boy Scout Field Book. Available right here in Rensselaer, see Mark, available at the library. Boy Scout Field Book. Any other questions? Carol, do you have a question?
No, but if, Phil's naphtha soap is always an excellent thing keeping this first aid
Yeah.
kit. Because if you wash the poison ivy with it, it usually will.
We didn't talk about poison ivy at all. Big subject here in the Midwest. There's all kinds of solutions, all kinds of thoughts, all kinds of ideas.
In a bottle, brown.
The guy that told me used to work for the state, and he was in it all the time mowing ditches. He said, the easiest thing to do is wash it off with kerosene. I don't know. Ivy Tech, something like that's another good one. But good hygiene will reduce poison ivy if you know you're exposed to it. How many can identify poison ivy? Well, those that don't know it will someday learn. Good hygiene is important in all aspects of outdoor living. If from what my little presentation here, that's what you take home, I consider it a plus. Good hygiene solves so many things. Don't think you have to be Mountain Man Jack. Okay? Shave, wash, do the best you can with your teeth, wash your hands. Good hygiene is terribly important. Any more questions? Somebody's got 20 seconds. Okay, now before we go, I said we kind of had a tough nut to crack here, right? We cracked it. About lost it. 9 o'clock, Dr. Ricker, your meeting.
Well, we thank you very much, and we thank you all for coming. Come back next week and we'll do some high adventure stuff.